Millions are under lockdown as the Delta variant rips through China. But the party has a propaganda plan. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. And for all the YouTube censors watching, I just want to say, I fully support the medical consensus on the coronavirus from the World Health Organization and the CDC. With that out of the way, millions are under strict lockdown in China. Again.
China is facing its most extensive outbreak in months, as the highly transmissible Delta variant keeps on popping up in other places around the country.
So there's a couple things I have to make clear up front. First, I've been calling the coronavirus the CCP virus, since the reason we are all in a pandemic is because of the initial cover-up by the Chinese Communist Party. I'm also hoping calling it the CCP virus will help me get around any YouTube algorithms flagging me for talking about the CCP virus. But also, in talking about the surge in cases of the Delta variant, almost every single mainstream media outlet I looked at has been incredibly stupid about it. Okay, get this. China claims it's had 0 COVID cases since the initial outbreak in places like Beijing or even Wuhan, the epicenter of the whole pandemic. I mean, do they think we're stupid? Well, apparently, Bloomberg reports parts of China have been virus-free for months, including the original epicenter of Wuhan. The New York Times says the original CCP virus was stamped out with harsh efficiency in 2020. The Guardian says Beijing has previously boasted of its success in bringing domestic cases down to virtually 0 after coronavirus first emerged in Wuhan in late 2019, allowing the economy to rebound. Okay, first of all, you know how China's economic numbers are man-made and unreliable, according to China's premier? Well, guess what else is man-made and unreliable? China's CCP virus numbers. And yet, Western media just echo these bogus claims without question. It's bizarre. Look, what I said to you 16 months ago is still just as true today. The Chinese Communist Party's current narrative is that they're well on the way to winning the people's war against the coronavirus. So when the second wave comes, they're just going to do what they did before. Cover it up and arrest doctors and silence whistleblowers. This is how the CCP operates. You can't teach an old bear new tricks. Well, we're seeing another wave, and once again, the CCP is not going to tell us the whole story. So with that out of the way, China is in full lockdown mode again. The Delta variant has spread to half of China's provinces in just 2 weeks. Beijing has cut all rail, bus, and air links with areas where coronavirus cases have been found, and closed its doors to tourists during the peak summer holiday travel season. Only essential travelers are allowed to enter, if they have a negative nucleic acid test. Other cities are doing similar lockdowns. In some cities, millions are unable to leave their homes. The current outbreak supposedly began in the city of Nanjing in July. According to city officials, the outbreak in China began when a group of airport workers in Nanjing were sickened, probably from exposure to an infected person who arrived on a flight from Russia, which is good news. If there's an outbreak, the Communist Party can just blame filthy disease-spreading foreigners, kind of like they did during the initial outbreak. Although, since there's a separate Delta cluster in the Chinese city of Zhengzhou, where hospital and cleaning staff have been infected, who knows if this outbreak really did begin with a flight from Russia. But this CCP virus outbreak is trouble for the Chinese Communist Party. Well, no, not because some Chinese people might die. When has the CCP ever cared about that? No, it's bad because it could affect the party's vaccine diplomacy.
Another outbreak of Delta in China is also concerning because the country has fully vaccinated more than 40% of its population already. The Chinese government has been relying solely on Chinese vaccines, which have been shown to be less effective than mRNA vaccines. And there's very little data on how effective these Chinese shots are against the Delta variant. It calls into question how effective China's COVID control measures really are.
Is this latest outbreak raising questions over how effective Chinese vaccines are? No, it doesn't raise questions. Quit asking questions. Chinese reporters don't ask questions. Why are you? Well, probably because many of the 90 countries that relied on Chinese vaccines are battling outbreaks now. Even a top Chinese official admitted Chinese vaccines aren't very effective. And that was with the original strain of the CCP virus. It's looking even worse for the Delta variant. On July 22nd, 2 days after the Nanjing cluster was first detected, a health expert in the city said the vast majority of those infected there had been vaccinated. We're seeing this happen around the world. Malaysia's health ministry has announced that it will stop using the COVID-19 vaccine produced by China's Sinovac once its supplies end. Other Southeast Asian countries have said they are looking to mix and match the Chinese-made shots with those from Western manufacturers amid a surge in cases driven by the highly transmissible Delta variant. So it's looking pretty bad for Chinese vaccines. Who could have predicted? But that just means it's time for a little propaganda switcheroo. Delta is a problem for all countries. That's why an expert at the Chinese CDC points out Delta accounts for 80% of cases in the US, and they reinstituted a requirement for masks. That means Delta's spread is severe, and personal protection cannot be slackened even with vaccination. So the problem isn't the Chinese vaccines, it's that Delta is just so contagious. While Delta is more contagious than the original CCP virus, this propaganda line is pretty familiar. It's in fact the same kind of thing the Chinese regime said about the recent flooding in Zhengzhou and other cities. The problem is historic levels of rainfall. Don't ask about the drainage problems in major Chinese cities. So how will the Chinese Communist Party respond to these new virus outbreaks? Well, so far they're going back to the authoritarian lockdown tactics they used the first time. And because the party has pushed the narrative that the pandemic has proved the superiority of their authoritarian model, it's hard for them to back down. In other words, the only solution is an eternal lockdown. I can't wait. But first, it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, fans who support us and our efforts to expose the truth about the Chinese Communist Party by contributing through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Black Label asks, do Chinese citizens still believe in the mandate of heaven? Hell, does the CCP acknowledge the mandate? I can imagine all the flooding has probably stirred all that up in party ranks. The mandate of heaven. The idea that if the ruler is doing well, there'll be no natural disasters. And if the ruler has turned bad, heaven will send disasters like floods. And China just had massive flooding. Even though the Chinese Communist Party worked very hard to eliminate traditional Chinese culture and thought, things like natural disasters make the CCP very nervous. It kind of makes it look like maybe they don't have everything under control. Which is why during the recent flooding, you have official censorship directives saying, regarding the heavy rain striking Henan and other places, shift the focus of reporting toward post-disaster recovery. Without prior permission, do not publish unauthorized images showing dead bodies, take an exaggeratedly sorrowful tone, or hype or draw connections to past events. In other words, make everything look like it's under control, even when it's totally falling apart. The CCP virus is the same. The party tried to cover it up. When it couldn't do that anymore, they said China was courageously containing the virus to protect the world. When it spread around the world, they started blaming other countries for the virus. You get the idea. So while the CCP would never acknowledge there is a mandate of heaven, they act like there is. Thanks for your question and your support, Black Label. And a big thank you to everyone who supports China Uncensored on Patreon. We could not do this show without you. So thank you for joining us in the fight to expose the Chinese Communist Party to the world. If you're interested in joining, head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored. You'll get a bunch of cool perks, including the chance to have me answer your question on the show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.